Hey, welcome back to 23 Degrees Sideways, Coyote in the Highlands, except in the valley. We're going to talk some more now. Let me move this just a little bit with the sunlight about this space that I'm staying in and how you would structure it as a co-op. What do we do to move forward? Most of the people who are in the Doomer Optimist or Homestead or communal living or other types of environments really don't go for this idea, okay? It's a small space. There's not enough room to garden. It's not going to be running your goats on the pasture or whatever. So that, half the people just ignore that right away. It's not an urban area. It's got too much land and green stuff, and you have to maintain yards and build separate buildings and separate water heaters and all that. And then, so the urban people don't like that. To make this work, you have to function within a capitalist society. So the social democrats just aren't going to like it. There's a lot of people who just aren't going to like this. But there's a lot of ways in which it would work very well. The open-minded classical leftish liberals of the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and even parts of the 60s would love this thing. We've had some very big cultural changes where we don't talk to each other, we don't get involved with each other. We have these weird little bubbles of isolation which are really bad for you. So, how do you do this? Well, there's some structural things in here that would be much easier to deal with. This is all standard AC units, so they're very energy intensive and stuff, and the older buildings, the insulation value is not so high. There's a lot of stuff you could do to this to make it better without spending a lot of money. Much more energy efficient without spending a lot of money. The gardening and stuff, that all works very well. Gray water stuff, there's a lot you could do very easily. And that's all fine. What you have to do is you have to make it work for the people. And where you run into problems with that most often is ideologies. So as I mentioned in a previous video, I am not the standard big government, low freedom, lefty, progressive, global warming, climate crisis type of person. I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not a vegan, I don't want to eat bugs, I don't want to live in my little hole and own nothing and enjoy it. However, I would like to outsource some of the additional complexities of modern life that are completely unnecessary to a group corporate structure. I just want to be able to have my freedom while that goes on. And that's what a co-op is really supposed to be about, this kind of lifestyle co-op. You have to find people who are willing to engage in it without being overly selfish or overly controlling or overly ideological. And I think about this. I think about, there's some conservative people. There's Chris and Ginger and some other people that I would like that I could live next to and handle with this, except that most of them would not deal well with any kind of sharing of land or space. They want their own individual fortress castle, and that's where it all breaks down. The people who are okay with sharing space seem to all be okay with sharing space as long as you follow their specific authoritarian groupthink rules. There's got to be a middle ground here. I know there's a middle ground because these things exist. I've been to several housing co-ops where people live their own lives, and I've been on shooting trips with people who live in those co-ops. So it's not like it's all one thing or the other, A lot of them tend to be gentle Jeffersonian libertarians, which was considered a leftist position in the 30s, the early 30s, before FDR, late 20s, Epic, Upton Sinclair, all that stuff. So it's kind of interesting to think about. You look at this, well, you have separate entrances, you have separate spaces. Not everyone's going to be outdoors all day. So this works out pretty well as long as you have a couple structures in place. You need to have some communication structures. One of the things that we do very well in some parts of Western society, Arizona has laws about this, is when you have a property owners association or a homeowners association, there are legal structures to how you have to run the meetings, and stuff that's not on the agenda can only be put on the agenda. You can't use the meeting, you can't take over the meeting with stuff that's not on the agenda. So that's a protection. And that's one example. There's also provisions for open meetings. amount of discussion that's tolerable or that's mandated because you don't want someone to just come in and take over the meeting because, oh, it's my right of speech to shut you all up. The standard, that's a standard tactic in certain parts of the left. There are provisions for private, closed executive meetings where other things get discussed without interruption. There's this whole set of provisions, and it works reasonably well. What you have to do is you have to transfer that to a co-op model where you've got the ability to have certain types of conversations in certain environments with the protections that keep it from getting inimical, aggressive, even violent. And so some of the things you do, you have a communal meal every day or 2 or 3 times a week. That's actually a really good thing, like a kind of a cafeteria thing. And you could actually restructure this so that the individual kitchens are even smaller and that you have a larger communal kitchen. That's a pretty cool idea. You have to get over the ideological basis of diet and get into some other things. I would never deal well with a vegan, vegetarian, high carb type of mandate enforcement situation, but at the same time I want everyone to be free to have what they want. So that's one of those sticking points. I don't care if you want to eat nothing but pea paste. I know that that's bad agriculture, but that's not the conversation we're having. We're having the conversation about freedom to do stuff. You have to let me have my grill. I will let you have your pea paste. No problems. And I don't have to put my grilled food on your pea paste. No problem. It goes both ways. It's one of the things I've always loved about the vegan and vegetarians is like, you have to have separate pans for meat because it's contaminated. And I'm like, well, you have to have separate pans for all the contaminated food that you eat, because if you don't wash it right, it's going to get into my meat and cause allergic reactions. It goes both ways, but it's always presented as one way, evil meat eaters. And that's one of the things that I'm actually getting at in this video is how do you prevent all of that strife, without making it too narrow a space for it to work, because you can build these all day long with no problem. You could corporatize this in a cooperative corporation, shares, economic democracy kind of setup very easily. But you have to get away from that. So one of the things that you would do is no complaints, no negatives, no snide remarks, no snide politics, no passive-aggressive negativity in communal environments, communal meetings or environments. That would actually be a really fantastic and great way to manage meetings. It would also be a really good way to manage the healing retreats that we've been talking about. Structure the communications in certain environments. You can go yell and scream and do anything you want outside of that environment, but in these environments, some basic behavioral politeness concerns. And I think that's really all you need. That's all you need. Basic cleanliness and hygiene, there's got to be some sort of minimum. But how you structure that's actually not that hard. None of it's really hard. None of it's super complicated. There's no real big issues about anything, really. You want to minimize your wet water use. You want to make it as reasonable as possible to be in the environment that you're in. So this is a condensed environment. You have to be careful with your gray water if you're using gray water. Everything here is artificial grass. There's some plants and some xeriscaping, but all the grass is artificial grass, which is fine because it's a specifically dog-friendly type of Airbnb property, but I wouldn't want artificial grass everywhere. At the same time, I don't want just DG, decomposed granite, everywhere with a couple of cactus. I think that it could be gardened. I think you can do a lawn. I think you can have a lawn for multiple people to share that is really, really successful and sound, ecologically sound. That's part of what I'm getting at, is that you can have all these comforts if you set it up right. And I think you can set it up right. One of the things that this specific property lacks is shade, and it's an easy fix. There's any number of easy fixes. and that keeps some of your heat load down in the summer. You know, not a problem. This is relatively speaking an easy one to do, and you can do this in outlying areas and make it even better with a little bit of carpooling and stuff. You can make it really, really work well. You just have to keep out of other people's hair, face, business, maintain decent social rules, and kind of structure it. Do you need a religious foundation for this? Like, how do you structure it so that people will listen and consider it important? For some people, a religious foundation is necessary. For some people, some other form of social foundation is necessary. This is one of the reasons why nudist colonies back in the olden days, 50s, 60s, 70s, worked out so well. Was people had a kind of, it wasn't the nudism itself, it was the idea of being dissidents of a sort made all of the other stuff not matter. There was a kind of an overarching theme, and that works out really, really well. Not that I'm saying that nudist colony is the way to go, but something like that, without the something being reliant on an ideology. Some shared thing that you can bring out to the table. Maybe it is cooking. Maybe it is the idea of the weekly barbecue. Whatever it is, put it together, bring it in there, and see how it works. There are a lot of bases. You have to get into the money. You have to make this all work financially, and that's not a problem. You just have to you have to be reasonable and rational about what's going on. You're buying shares. Your management level is dependent on what you're doing. Like, are you part of the board? Are you making the decisions? Are you buying and selling? If you're not, you really have to shut up and let people do their jobs. That is one of the big pitfalls that I've seen in these types of communities, is that someone gets a hair up their butt and basically takes over decision making without any of the responsibility to back it up with paperwork or anything. I've seen this in Legion posts and VFW posts and stuff too. So this is a known thing, and this is why we have things like Robert's Rules of Order, so that you don't have that happen. Maintain the rules, keep them as light and easy as possible. Now, how do you do this on a budget? Next video. Stay sideways.